Hunting by Stars. Chapter 10. Mitch's Going Away Story. Mitch. Really, I shouldn't have put up such a fight. It was nobody's fault but my own that my leg got broken, snapped clean through. I was lucky for that. My calf could have been a bad bag of shards. If I had only listened to instructions when they found us in that tree house, nobody would have gotten hurt. It is neither the mandate nor intention to cause hurt. It never was. But I recognized that I was different back then, more focused on individual freedom than collective survival. I was a child. I was blind, but now I see. Things were rough, and I was convinced I was going to die. But I clung to the idea that you were out there, that you were going to make it. I feel like I'd done my job as the big brother, creating a distraction, letting you slip away into the God-forsaken woods. Now I'm embarrassed that I left you out there to fend for yourself. Anything could have happened. How could I have told you to climb into the trees, to hide? You could have fallen. And what if they didn't hear you fall and you were just out there, broken, at the base of a tree? Or what could have happened if you had managed to climb down? Over the years, I think I've imagined everything. You eaten by bears, taken by the insane who didn't find help for their sickness, starving to death in the pines. I should have kept you with me. It would have been better to have you with me. Then we'd been saved together. I was selfish. In the early schools, were really nothing more than warehouses. There were fenced cages full of metal bunks and no plumbing, and we were just kind of stored in there. It wasn't all bad, though. There were regular meals, and the pastors involved gave us sermons and teachings every night before lights out, so we had something to think about other than our pain, our loneliness. It's weird to think that so many of us had been alone, and now there we were, hundreds of us all together, and yet still we felt lonely. That was before our hearts were relieved. Before we found grace, we were alone. Somehow, all together, we were more alone than ever. It was a few days before they really did anything about my leg. But what could they do? They had to wait for the doctors to show up. See, back then, the institutes didn't have their own staff. People covered whole regions. So sometimes we'd go a week without a doctor or a dentist or a nutritionist. That was really the horror of it all, the waiting. If someone got sick or hurt in between visits, well, there was nothing that could be done. Sometimes releasing someone from their misery was the only kindness that could be afforded. But I was young and tough. In fact, it was how I dealt with and survived those first days that made them consider me for a higher calling in the first place. Though I was only a boy, a confused and lowly wretch, I was saved. Isn't life wonderful sometimes? The first year is kind of a blur. There was a lot to get used to, and things were changing as fast as you could acclimate. And then there was the way you haunted me. I couldn't close my eyes without seeing you, either still swaying in the wind, clutching a thin trunk, or lying on the ground, just splayed out, skeleton, too small to be real. The group formed friendships. That's inevitable in any situation, but especially in ours. After a while, we learned to let go, to not be sentimental about things or people. Things and people were one and the same. They could be lost, moved, taken away, broken, no use in getting attached. It was much better to form a friendship with the one thing that couldn't be taken. Someone who went with you when you moved. God. He was our friend and our father. He listened. He watched. He was constant. In fact, it was he who finally gave me peace about you being left out in the wilderness. If he was watching over me, then perhaps he was also watching over you. Perhaps you had been found too and taken in, or perhaps the end had been swift and painless. I found peace in that. After that, I was separated from the herd. A few others and I, all around 12 or 13 years old. That's when they started training us for the intelligence program. All of us were still stuck on our own before lives, of course. So at first, we wanted to escape, to burn everything to the ground, as it were. But after some time, after being taught the reality of the world and the important role we could play in it, well, we started to see the light. Mind you, it was an intense program. We spent a lot of time isolated, away from the others, who were too old or too stubborn to change their minds and hearts. Sometimes we were even kept away from one another, but I had the Holy Bible to keep me company. I must have read it from front to back 4 times in that first year alone. Now, of course, I understand that's not such a feat. Now I understand it's just desperation. We carry the words in our hearts. There's no need for paper and ink. That's a crutch, an introduction. I didn't get to go on any of the early missions. My leg kept me grounded. But again, small graces. It gave me more time to be mentored. I stayed in the offices and labs. I heard things. I learned things. I was brought in to help in the other ways that gave me insight into the future of the REM recovery mission. It wasn't all admin work and running errands either. I had my trials. I joined the doctors when they did procedures. I helped deliver vessels to the crematory. I tried to calm new students, especially the very young ones who were alone or maybe the first time ever. Some days I had questions. Most nights I questioned everything. It's hard to devote yourself completely to logic when you have to face yourself alone at night, knowing where you came from, knowing your own family members had met the same fate as those you helped lay to rest. But what could we do? Let the whole world crumble into madness and violence? How could we let that happen when there was a chance, a solution right there in front of us? And how could we, the dreamers, begrudge any of God's children the opportunity to rebuild and move on? You see, eventually everything would right itself. The world would settle, and the networks and systems would return, and then there would be no need to sacrifice anything. Then we could all live together again. It was almost too beautiful to be true, that we could play such a huge role in it all. It took years before I could sleep without nightmares, years before I could truly look at my own reflection in the mirror, but I got there, eventually, and just in time, too. What a gift it is to be here, to be part of the solution, when we have only just made the kind of breakthroughs that change the game for everyone. I'm excited again, for all of us. Things are going to change, and we are going to be here to see that change through. Oh, French, you wouldn't believe me if I told you, but the days of hunting and sacrifice are nearly over. Wait and see, believe and witness. We were once lost, but now we are found.